Globalism is often confused with globalization. They must be distinguished. These two words are not interchangeable synonyms, so this needs to be clarified from the start. Globalization is a process of integration and unification in the economy, politics, culture, and other spheres. Globalization is an objective and natural process that occurs due to the development of civilization. New means of communication appear, we discover new regions, we trade and interact with each other, building more and more connections. Globalization starts automatically with the emergence of our species. It is absolutely inevitable, fixed. Globalism is not a natural or objective process. It is an ideology. We have discussed liberalism, socialism, fascism, Nazism, and so on. Globalism is a phenomenon of the same kind. Thus, globalization is an objective process. It simply exists, it happens, and it cannot but happen. Globalism is an ideology that one may accept or reject, support or oppose. Globalism is an ideology that claims that the interests of the world are primary, not those of the nation-state. This general and rather abstract position in practice means the following: open borders, removal of barriers to migration, measures to weaken national identity, tolerance toward all religions, customs, minorities and viewpoints, dominance of supranational structures, financial, political, cultural, and ultimately the creation of a world government as a logical and inevitable step within this framework. From the point of view of globalism, good is everything that contributes to the erasure of all boundaries. The final goal is to create something like one large planetary family with no states, with a world government that acts in global interests. That is, ensures that everyone is fed and clothed, that there are no wars or hunger, that resources are distributed rationally and evenly, and that all regions of the Earth develop, not just some. Global problems require global solutions is the main slogan of globalism. Therefore, action must be collective and unified. A globalist is a person who shares these views. Today, globalism is a strong trend, especially in the Western world. News about positive discrimination, about we must accept even more refugees and so on, all relate to this. As concrete examples of political forces that share globalist ideas, one can name the Democratic Party in the United States with its leaders, and the Labour Party in the United Kingdom with its own. Globalists are opposed by nationalists, or patriots if preferred, who take the opposite position. The priority is the nation-state and its interests. Accordingly, all political decisions must be oriented toward benefiting the given state and the people living in it. Sovereignty is an unconditional value, therefore no supranational structures and certainly no world governments. The nation-state decides for itself what to do, and any external directives are unacceptable. The nation-state has its own authorities, courts, laws, army, police, president, parliament, and so on, and everyone is subject to them. The nation is unique and has its own culture and history, and national identity is extremely important. These must be preserved and passed on to future generations. An example of a politician who shares such views is Donald Trump with his Make America Great Again. In the modern world, there are three major issues where the contradictions between globalists and nationalists are especially clear. 1. Migration. Globalists advocate open borders, mixing of cultures, and thus the blurring of local national identity. Come to us, live, work, enrich us with your ideas, habits, and traditions. Even if you end up killing, raping, robbing, and living on benefits, nothing will be said because there are no bad nations, only bad individuals. Nationalists advocate strict border control, filters, walls, barbed wire, deportations, separation of family members if required by law, and preservation of national identity. 2. Climate. Globalists argue that since climate change affects everyone equally, the entire civilization, it cannot be left to itself. Collective action is required to develop solutions and maintain control. For this, international organizations must be created whose authority all countries will follow. Nationalists respond that they are accountable only to themselves. They cannot reduce production or emissions because this would harm national interests. Competitiveness would decline, enterprises would close, jobs would be lost, people would become poorer, and resources would be needed to switch to alternative energy, and so on. 3. International trade. Globalists support minimal tariffs and duties or their complete removal. Full freedom of trade. If you have a good product, bring it and sell it. Nationalists, as always, prioritize national interests. Trade without tariffs and other restrictions is possible, but only if there is a clear benefit, preferably greater than that of the partner. If it is necessary to protect domestic producers, sovereignty, or anything else, tariffs, restrictions, and bans will be imposed as needed. Finally, several remarks and responses to possible questions. First, in modern political discourse, the traditional terms left and right are moving into the background. They have not disappeared completely, but are used much less often, because over more than 200 years their content has become blurred. They are being replaced by globalists and nationalists who are more clearly distinguishable. The recent US election, Trump versus Harris, is an ideal illustration of this trend. Examine the candidates' programs and rhetoric. Today, identification as a globalist or a nationalist seems to be becoming primary. Second, is globalism merely a utopia? And are there any signs that a unified world could be a reality rather than just declarations? There are some indications of such a possibility, and they are called the European Union, which includes 27 very different countries that, despite centuries of conflict and disagreement, managed to reach agreements and begin to live under common rules. The well-known four freedoms of movement: people, goods, services, and capital. Of course, the European Union is far from the entire planet, but a transition to a unified world, if it is possible at all, must begin somewhere. So what has been achieved and still exists is a meaningful step. In addition, there are a number of organizations and institutions that are in essence globalist and do function. The United Nations, the IMF, the WTO, the WHO, the World Bank, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, UNESCO, the World Economic Forum in Davos, and others. People meet, discuss issues, and most importantly, they actually influence political processes worldwide. Third, globalism to some extent overlaps with cosmopolitanism, but these concepts are different and should be distinguished. Cosmopolitanism is a worldview, that is, more about philosophy and ethics. The emphasis is on respect for everyone, equal rights and freedoms, and the idea that there is nothing to divide because all people are human. Globalism is primarily about economics and politics, about the distribution of power and resources, governance, and unified standards in trade and political processes. Finally, the most important point: at first glance, globalism may seem like a reasonable idea, but in practice there are complications. The creation of a world government automatically means the concentration of enormous, if not extreme, power in the hands of a very small group of people. Who would make up a world government? Most likely leaders of former or existing states and representatives of the largest transnational corporations. One could also include some Nobel laureates, if they choose to participate. In any case, this results in an institution of no more than a few thousand members making decisions that determine the lives of 8, and in the future 10 or more billion people. Given human nature, this appears risky.